Welcome to Winning Begins at Home. Glad you're here today, as always. Thanks for joining us. I can't wait to share some content with you this week. I'm fired up about our content because it's going to really sort of build on last week's content. We're in the middle of a what I'm calling a series, I guess, on building a personal operating system. I've been challenged these last few months, really, as we've thought a lot about how to build a leadership operating system. And our Lead Everyday book's coming out September 2nd. I'm excited about that. Mark Miller and I've written that book, and we're pumped about that. We've been thinking through this operating system for a while. And so I started thinking about what would it look like for us to have a personal operating system, for us to be able to handle all the things that come in our life. And I know our lives don't work that way. We're not cutting cookies here, you know. Our lives are much more organic. But I do think there's some things that we can do to build in to have the lives that we want. And last week, we talked about how to win the first hour of the day. And so it won't surprise you that I'm going to back that up this week with how do we win the last hour of the day. I think it was Gandhi who said, each night when I go to sleep, I die. And then when I wake up in the morning, I'm reborn. And I don't know exactly spiritually what the deal is on what he's thinking there. But here's what I would say. Every night when we go to sleep, we really do get a chance to be recreated, and thankfully we got a new day today when we woke up, right? And we have a chance to reset and be refreshed. But the problem is, if we don't handle that last hour of the day correctly, we're not refreshed. We're exhausted. And so many leaders I talk to, they're just really struggling. They're tired every day. And I think some of that is we bring it on ourselves because we don't take care of the last hour of the day. So I think we're going to really win the first hour. It actually starts the night before. And so this week we're gonna look at 5 days worth of stuff here that I think could really help you take your sleep to the next level, which is really important. It's amazing when you look at some of the studies out there. I saw a study from Stanford. Some researchers found that people with consistent evening habits, routines, they actually fell asleep. I think it was 37% faster, and they were 47% more likely to get better sleep quality. They got more deep sleep, which I don't know if you've studied this or looked at it at all, but our bodies don't just need to be in a bed. They actually need to get some deep sleep, some restorative sleep. And there's all kind of cycles there. You look at the deep sleep cycle and the REM cycle and all that. You probably heard of that, but sometimes we're just in bed and we're tossing and turning and we don't get quality rest. And I think there's some things that we can do to solve that. So we'll look at some of that this week and have some conversation. I think most of us spend more time planning how to make the perfect cup of coffee in the morning than we do thinking about how we can wake up refreshed. The coffee's great, but it's not, you don't need the coffee to have a great day if you will really think through some of the stuff that we'll talk about. So let's talk a little bit about this connection between the morning and the evening routine. I think there really is a connection here going on. And I believe if you can just be purposeful, and I know there's some people listening and you're just like, this is not me, man. I don't do goals and I don't do rhythms and I don't do routines. I got a guy I know, he says, I don't like habits. I'm just going to challenge you to think about at least 2 habits. That winning that first hour, that content we talked about last week. If you missed that, go back and check it out. But let's win the last hour of the day. I think if we can do that, we really do set ourselves up for a great day. We get started off on the right foot, and there really is a connection between these two things. If we can win in these 2 places, I think the other hours, there's a lot of good things that happen as almost like a domino effect. And that first domino, I believe, is the evening before. If we'll just think of it that way, that's what gets everything in motion for the next day. And I'm going to give you some very practical stuff to think about this week as we do. I want to remind you that your brain needs some transition time. If you know anything about brain science at all, there's a day mode and there's a night mode. And the cortisol and all that stuff is spiking in the morning and then all through the day. And then we got this thing called this melatonin going on in the evening when the lights go down. Unfortunately, we live in a world where the lights never go down now. There's screens all the time. And if we're not careful, we'll trick our brains into thinking that it's daytime all the time. And so there's this cycle that goes on. And I want to encourage you to give some thought to that. What kind of environment are you creating that is going to make it conducive for sleep, for good sleep, for great sleep, really? And what I've noticed is, I've been actually focusing on my sleep more this year than I ever have before, and it's actually gotten a lot better. I've actually always slept really good. I just don't sleep a long time, but I've really worked on some stuff, and I think it's really helped me. But there is a correlation between poor evening choices. I'm not going to be your mama here and say you need to set your bedtime at a certain hour, but actually a consistent routine. If you really will choose a time and you say, I'm going to stick to this, I'm going to have some discipline here, it actually is going to position you to win that next day. And I think really there's just a lot of good stuff that begins to happen if that first domino is in place, in the right place. So let me give you a couple of practical things today that I think you can do. One of the things that happens that maybe distract us, we'll get into all kind of stuff this week about creating that right environment. But one of the things I think that happens that keeps us from sleeping well is we have these loops going on in our brain and all kind of stuff that we're thinking about. And we lie down at night and our mind begins to race and we're thinking about tomorrow's project, or we've got to take the kids to school, or we forgot to pay the bill online, and whatever it is, you've just got stuff going on and your mind is racing. And I think part of our evening routine, that last hour of the day, might be to think about closing some of those loops. And so, as simple as it sounds, get yourself a legal pad and a pen, a journal, whatever you want to write with. But I would encourage you to write this down. And if you've got 5 or 6 things that are going on in your mind, just write them down on the paper. Write them down on the paper, and I promise they'll be there tomorrow and you can deal with them. But actually, the studies would show that if you do that, if you just write it down, your brain actually lets it go for those hours while you're asleep, knowing that it'll be there tomorrow. I can deal with it. And here's the reality. You're never going to get everything done every day. There's always going to be these loops. There's always going to be this stuff that's going on in your mind and heart. You're thinking about, you didn't get it finished. We think about our work that way. Have you ever had a day at work where you left the office, or you left, the cubicle, or wherever you work, and maybe it's in your basement, and you thought, there's just nothing else left to do. All the work's done. That's probably never happened. There's always more to do. And so the same thing's true here with these loops. We've always got this stuff going on in our mind late in the day. And I want to encourage you to write those things down. Even if you take time before and let's say you're watching TV or you're looking at your screen, and then you get to this point and you say, I'm going to go to bed now. That stuff's going to turn back on. I mean, you may think you can distract it for a while, but it's just there. Your brain is always working. And so writing that down can be such a powerful thing if we'll write it down, and just, it sets us up for tomorrow's success. So tonight, I want to encourage you to begin to wind down an hour before you're planning on trying to go to sleep, just that last hour, and do a couple of things here. First of all, close those loops with that legal pad and that paper. It'll take you 3 or 4 minutes just to write that down. You're going to have an hour here. So what do you do during the last hour? Maybe you have a conversation with somebody, important in your life, maybe somebody in the family, maybe your spouse. You think about that. I would say, if you're going to have a conversation with your spouse, make sure it's a positive conversation. You're never going to sleep better if you have a negative conversation before you do that. You may need to close the loop there too, and just say, the loop may actually stay open there, but you're going to write it down. So we're going to come back to this. We need to have a conversation, but we're not going to. One of the things Laura and I agreed on very early on in our marriage, we're not going to go to bed angry. I've heard couples say that before, and I think it was Billy Graham's wife who I heard say one time they made a similar decision. They wouldn't go to bed angry, and she said there were many nights we never went to bed because we had some conversations that we couldn't resolve. I think we need to stay positive before we try to go to sleep. But I love the idea of tabling something until tomorrow. We're gonna resolve that, because we want unity here as we go to sleep. Maybe something with your kid, you're just not going to solve that at 10:30 at night or 11 o'clock. It needs to have a conversation, a positive conversation somewhere else in the day. And so think about that. But another thing you can do during that last hour is you might consider reading. I love to read a non-screened, just pick up a book. I mean, I know sometimes we want to listen to a book and we want to, we want to go through our Kindle or whatever. It's, you can read it on a screen, but I think there's something powerful about taking a book and opening it up and maybe reading for 15 minutes and just letting your mind and your heart begin to settle. And I'll leave you with one picture today. So if you take a glass, let's just say you took a glass, 16-ounce glass, let's say, and you took that glass, and let's say you're by a river and you dip the glass in the river, you'll notice that river water, it does have some sediment in it, depending on the river and the clarity of the water. maybe you Colorado people, your water's clear. We're happy for you. That's great. But most rivers, there's some kind of sediment in that. If you set that glass on the counter and you gave it an hour, that sediment would begin to settle toward the bottom and there would be some clarity. I think that's a good picture for the way we want to think about going to sleep. We want that last hour to be a time where all the stuff of the day just begins to settle, and now we can have as much clarity as possible as we prepare to sleep. And so that would be my challenge for you today. Spend that last hour focusing on closing those loops, setting that stuff aside for tomorrow. It'll be there. And then let the river water settle as you read, or you have a positive conversation. You thank somebody for the things they've done today. Maybe even you spend some time thinking about all the things you're grateful for today, not the things you don't have, but the things you do have. I think there's some power in that, and it really sets us up for a great night's sleep. All right. I hope you'll join us tomorrow. Got some very practical stuff this week. I really think we can be sleeping better by the end of the week. So that's my goal for all of us. I hope you'll continue to join us. Share with your friends and family. Maybe have some sleep conversations this week about some of the things that we talk about. I think you can encourage others, and maybe even share an episode with somebody that you care about. All right, I care about you guys. Love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow for more Winning Begins at Home.